Hey, thanks for joining me today. We're going to take a look at what I found is a pretty economical 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. 12.8 volts nominal. This is by a company called Siekon, and it is kind of a standard, I think you would call this a group 31, I believe, type of format. And let's talk about what the basic specs are. It does come with a couple of extra M8 terminal bolts and some positive and negative insulator caps in the box. Comes with a pretty decent user manual. This particular battery, and we'll get into the price in a minute, but this is probably the least expensive battery I have seen, 100 amp hour 12 volt battery with low temperature cutoff. And we're going to test and make sure that that performs as it should. But if you're looking for a battery that you might have to use in an area where it does get very cold overnight and you want to make sure that you're not accidentally charging it, or even during the day, you're not charging it if the battery gets excessively cold where you might damage the cells, this is something that you might want to consider, something with that low voltage or that low temperature disconnect. So supposedly it has that protection. Like I said, we're going to test that. But let's talk a little bit about what the specs are on this battery. All right, from a dimension standpoint, this battery is 12.95, so just under 13 inches wide. It is about 8.43 inches tall, and I don't think that includes the terminal bolts. And then it is also about 6.77 inches deep, so just shy of 7 inches. Group 31, as I mentioned, I think is the proper designation for this particular format. You can put a maximum of 4 of these in parallel or 4 of these in series with that 100 amp BMS that it has. Now that means you can actually do a 4S4P configuration, which would be 16 batteries total. And that would give you, I think, a little bit over 20 kilowatt hours of battery capacity. Since it is a 100 amp BMS, the maximum continuous discharge and charge rate is rated for 100 amps. Although I think we're probably going to be able to get a little bit more than that 100 amps as a discharge rate. And we're going to test that to see if that is the case. And we're also going to make sure that it can sustain that 100 amps for a reasonable period of time. So this battery from Siekon does have all the normal protection parameters you would expect. So it's got charging over current protection, discharge over current protection, short circuit protection, high temperature charging protection, and as I mentioned, it also has that low temperature cutoff that we're going to test. And in terms of weather resistant, this battery is marine rated, so it's good for boating and trolling applications, which means that it's fine in a light rain. So you would not want to submerge this battery, which is pretty much the case with any lithium-based battery. Although you do want to be careful, because if you get into a heavy enough rain where you get water sort of puddling on the top of this, you do run the risk of potentially shorting this out. So you do want to take caution there. But in terms of just withstanding a light rain, going to get a little bit of wet, not really a big deal. All right, let's go put this Siekon battery through its paces and make sure it performs up to the specs that they list for it. 13.9 volts. So fully charged. Let's hook this up to my DC battery tester. Find out if we can get a full 100 amp hours out of this, which should equate to 1,280 watt hours. Maybe we can do a little bit better than that, but we'll run it all the way down until the BMS shuts off. Let's go ahead and hook that up right now. We can see we're pulling 13.9 volts off the terminals right now through the tester. I'm gonna go ahead and dial it up to 10 amps, and let's get this party started. We're gonna be watching that energy button, or that energy reading down at the bottom. Currently reading zeros, because I do have this zeroed out. And let's get this kicked off, and we are gonna pull what looks to be about 127, just under 128 watts, till this runs all the way down and the BMS shuts us off. And we'll find out if we got that full 100 amp hours or that 1,280 watt hours. We'll find out. All right, looks like we are done with the discharge test. Let's just zoom in here on the tester. You can see there on the bottom, we have 104 amp hours out of that rated 100 amp hours. So we actually did better by 4% on the amp hours, and in terms of watt hours, 1,273.6. So just a hair under the 1,280 rated watt hours that we would expect out of this system. So that's pretty good numbers out of this budget battery. All right, I've got this Siekon battery about 50% charged, and I have attached my Victron Smart Shunt to it so that we can monitor whether or not it's getting a charge or it has stopped charging. So we're going to put this thing in a deep freeze so that we can test that low temperature cutoff protection. I'm going to put that in my DC freezer here. You see my current temperature is at 10 degrees, and yeah, we're just going to let it sit there for at least 12 hours and get this thing fully frozen solid. And then we're going to hook it up to a charger and see if it actually begins to take a charge or not. That would have actually fit a lot better if I hadn't attached the Bluetooth module. But anyway, I got it in there. All right, let the freezing begin. All right, let's get this battery out of the deep freeze. It has been in here for actually about 36 hours, so it should be pretty well frozen solid. The temperature indicator on the fridge shows 0 degrees Fahrenheit, so we are basically super frozen. All right, now the whole point of low temperature disconnect protection is that it shuts the battery's ability to be charged down when that temperature hits 32 degrees on the core. And look at the condensation on that thing. That is all frosted up. All right, let me see if I can get the charger on here. All right, now you can make out the red LED here that says that it is not charging. And we have a green LED that says it does currently have power. So I do have it plugged in to my system here, but let's find out what happens if I connect the charging clamps. Now, other batteries that have low temp charging protection this thing will detect the connection and start to charge and then immediately get shut down by the BMS. So let's find out if that's how it behaves. Actually, it didn't even fire up at all. So yeah, it is definitely not taking a charge. So let's leave this in this state. Right now it is 10 o'clock in the morning. Like I said, this thing is frozen solid. It is really condensating now because it's pretty warm and humid in this room. So let's let this run. In fact, I'm going to leave the air conditioning off in this room to sort of speed up the thawing process. And we'll see if this automatically resumes charging on its own at some point during the day. So we'll check back. I'm going to just put my tablet up there so we can get an easier visual indication here. You can see the current is currently set, no pun intended, at 0 amps. So it's able to provide, the charger here is able to provide 14.4 volts, but we are not producing any current because this battery has got to shut down. So we'll turn this back on and check this in a few hours and see if it's been able to rise to a chargeable temperature and whether or not it resumes on its own. All right, it's about 2 p.m. Let me just check the tablet. It's definitely running, and you can see we are pushing, looks like 13.2 amps. 186 watts, so it is definitely now taking a charge. So the low temp protection cutoff and then resumption definitely works. All right, let's do some load testing on this Siekon battery. Now, it is rated for a continuous discharge rate of 100 amps, and I do have two 2000 watt inverters connected to it. All right, so let's start adding some load, and then over here on the right, we are going to kind of monitor the amount of current. You can see we're pulling 0.5 amps right now, which is basically just the parasitic draw from the AC inverters that I currently have attached. So let me go ahead and start adding up some amps here and make sure that it'll sustain at least 100 amps total. All right, so we are at 127 amps. Let's do a quick 10-minute test. All right, no problem running over that 100 amp hour continuous discharge rate. All right, now that we've confirmed that it'll successfully discharge at just a little bit over 100 amps continuous, let's try pushing that a little bit and see if we can get a little bit more out of it. So let me go ahead and turn on one of my space heaters here. Let's see what happens if we go another 100 watts. Eventually what's going to happen is the output voltage of the battery, because of the load, is going to drop below the low voltage alarm on my AC inverters, and that's going to cause those to start reacting. So that's going to be the limiting factor here. But we are at 160 amps. Yeah, we are getting just about 200 amps here. I can't really get more current going through this than that, simply because my AC inverter does have a fairly sensitive low voltage alarm and cutoffs. But of course, it's not something you typically would want to do on a 100 amp 12 volt battery. All right, let's do a quick wrap up on this with a few final comments. I think this Classics version of this Siekon battery is actually probably the best deal that I've seen to date on a battery in this particular capacity class in lithium iron phosphate. It's currently selling on Amazon US for $229, which already puts it ahead of its competition. Most of them, with all the various discounts and promos factored in, are in that $250 and up range. And those don't actually include low temp cutoff protection like this one does. And this does have a 5-year warranty. I don't think I mentioned that before. And also, Siekon is actually not a newcomer. They've actually been in the business for about 20 years, mostly doing OEM work for other brands. So yeah, I think if you're in the market for something in that 12 volt, 100 amp hour capacity class, this is about the best deal I think that you're going to find right now. I'll put links to this particular one in the video description below if you do want to go check it out. And hey, I hope you did find something of value in the video, maybe learned something or found something interesting. If you did, please consider hitting that like button for me. I'd very much appreciate that. So thanks for joining me for this video. I do hope you'll join me for the next one. And until then, have fun out there.